Marty Cohen was a gifted linguist and student of ancient military strategy who stepped away from academic Egyptology and opened a woodworking shop. Away from the bitter politics and petty rivalries, he's happy to take care of his people, play the occasional war game, and try to make a good life. Yet when business takes a turn for the worse, an opportunity appears. He gets summoned back to Egypt. An off-the-grid dig funded by an eccentric financier has discovered texts that may be the earliest Egypt has produced. And they'll pay Marty silly amounts of cash just to fly out and take one little look. Hello and welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, aka Ambar, and today I'll be doing a spoiler-free review of M.A. Rothman's and DJ Butler's Time Trials. Time Trials is a 2023 novel by M.A. Rothman and DJ Butler, and it is first in a series, actually. It is not quite a standalone, and I'm not sure what that series is called, to be honest. Funnily enough, this one actually bends some genres, and this quote kind of details this pretty well. There's a quote, I'm not even sure who this is from, but it's some reviewer says if Michael Crichton came back from the dead riding a T-Rex, it would not even be as fun as Time Trials is. It's something along that lines. I might have misquoted that. But that does actually describe this pretty well. It is kind of like in that vein of Michael Crichton's stuff from the little I've read of his work. It is kind of a thriller, but it also has some fantasy elements, even some elements that would remind you of like progressive fantasy, like Dungeons & Dragons type of stuff, but also some sci-fi elements. It's actually a pretty interesting blending that I think Rothman and Butler pull off pretty well. I believe Rothman's the one with the science elements, and Butler the more fantastic elements, of course, but I've not read anything by Rothman before this, though I've read probably about 10 other books by Butler at this point, so this was my first experience with Rothman, of course, then. So I did read the prequel story, Rise of the Administrator, which was in a Bain anthology, Worlds Long Lost. There's also a tangential companion story on Bain's website called The Quail Runs, which is by Butler. I believe The Rise of the Administrator can actually be found in a separate volume. It might be expanded upon in that separate volume. I'm not really sure. I have not read that standalone version of it. But anyways, in the story we have Marty Cohen, who is a small business owner, but years ago worked as an Egyptologist. He's tired and life is one of survival, paychecks acting as lifelines. It's a drab life, but it's not a terrible one. He's middle-aged, divorced, half Chinese, half Jewish man who left the academic life behind, even with his love of the Egyptian language. It seems it may not have been entirely his choice. In part, it stems from his disdain for the academic elite, which is completely understandable, Marty, I feel ya. So he is actually at the doctor's at the start of the story, trying to understand his poor sleep and fatigue. Soon he gets a call from an old colleague, and he finds himself back in the field, essentially. So we do have some parts from the point of view of basically most of the other characters in this party of sorts, like Lawana, who is actually an Aborigine anthropologist from Australia. Also have Sirjan, who's a Sikh from India. He's special forces and stuff like that. So we have other people like Francois, who's technically the eccentric Frenchman who leads the expedition, pays for the expedition, rather. Marty becomes basically the leader. He's described as looking at Gerard Depardieu, so that's who I had in my head for the story. But we do get some important stuff, especially at the beginning, that Marty cares about his people, which is why he actually goes to Egypt in the first place, because he needs some cash for, his employees, essentially. So we also have some supernatural things that happen to these people, though. It's kind of modern tech in ancient times as well. And it looks like magic, but I would think remembering Clarke's laws here, especially the any sufficiently advanced technologies in a single rule for magic one, is pretty important. So it's, again, a kind of a thriller that is in some ways a mix of Haggard's romps, like from the late 19th century, like She or King Solomon's Mine, or even like Robert E. Howard, Solomon Kane stuff, or even Indiana Jones, whatever you want to go with. It's mixed with the sci-fi again, like I guess you could compare it maybe a tiny bit to Clarke's childhood ends, like barely though. And of course the time travel aspects, which is pretty important, and I don't feel like it's a spoiler because it's in the name of the book. It's really fun though. It's a good blend of these fantastic and science fiction elements. Definitely a book you would get today. It's definitely a contemporary book, I feel like. And then again, like I said, the book at the end definitely points to a book 2 that honestly seems like it would be better than the first just by the setting. Personally, I think it sounds cooler. But I was very impressed with this one. This one actually, well, it'll probably be out by the time you're listening to this, so I got an early copy. I was not given one for an honest review. I just got one because I wanted one, and Baen does give out ARCs 3 months in advance digitally for those unaware. And here we are. So maybe time trials if you want to read something by Rothman or Butler, something that's like kind of contemporary, sci-fi, thriller, fantasy elements in there too. It's pretty fun. I think most of you that watch my channel will probably enjoy this. So it's been Liam with Liam's Lyceum. I'll catch you next time.